Christmas morning is supposed to feel warm, right? Like cinnamon and pine needles and the quiet hum of family togetherness. But for me, Christmas has started feeling more like frostbite, cold, creeping, and impossible to ignore. I'm 36 now, and I've spent most of my adult life pretending that being excluded didn't sting, that family ties weren't supposed to strangle. But this year broke something. Or maybe it revealed something that was already broken long ago. My name's Riley. I'm the oldest of three siblings, me, then my sister Tessa, 33, and our younger brother Sean, 29. Growing up, I was the quiet one. Not shy, exactly, but always the one expected to understand. When Tessa threw tantrums, I was told to be patient. When Sean failed a class or crashed Dad's car, I was told, don't be too hard on him. Riley, he's still figuring things out. That was the soundtrack of my childhood. You're the responsible one. You're the easy one. You're the one we don't have to worry about. At some point, that stopped feeling like a compliment and started sounding like a dismissal. I left home at 18 for college and never really moved back. I worked hard, built my own tech company, and, after nearly burning out by 30, sold it for more money than I'll probably ever need. I kept my success quiet, though. No big announcements, no Lamborghini in the driveway. That's never been me. I still drive a 10-year-old Subaru, wear clothes until they fade, and never once mentioned to my family that I'm technically a multimillionaire. Not because I wanted to test them or anything dramatic like that, but because I knew, deep down, that money would change the way they saw me. And not in a good way. Tessa, on the other hand, has always been about optics. She lives for Instagram stories of candid family brunches where everyone's mysteriously wearing coordinated outfits. She documents her life like she's pitching a Hallmark movie, all carefully curated smiles and seasonal throw pillows. She's married to Mark, who is just as obsessed with appearances, and they have two kids, Ashton, 6, and Everly, 4. Tessa calls them her miracles and insists the rest of us refer to them as the littles, which honestly makes my skin crawl a little every time. Sean floats. That's the best way I can describe him. One month he's selling real estate. The next he's doing landscape design. The next he's launching a podcast about mindful masculinity that disappears after 3 episodes. He's always had charm, though. That easy, disarming way of making everyone feel like they're the most important person in the room. It worked on my parents, still does, if we're being honest. Our parents, Joyce and Daniel, are, well, complicated. My mom's the kind of woman who calls herself brutally honest when she's really just rude. My dad's quieter, but no less passive-aggressive. They mean well, or at least, they convince themselves they do. But over the years, their accidental slights started to feel pretty intentional. Like when they forgot to tell me about Sean's engagement party, then insisted they thought I wouldn't be able to make it anyway. Or when I gifted them a trip to Napa for their anniversary, and they spent the entire time posting photos captioned, "Thanks to our wonderful Tessa for organizing this," as if I didn't exist. But this Christmas was different. I'd been living in Seattle for the past 5 years, but I bought a cabin just outside Denver last summer. A place with big windows, a roaring fireplace, and enough room for everyone to gather comfortably. I thought, maybe foolishly, that it could be the start of something new, a fresh tradition. I offered it to the family as a potential Christmas spot back in September. I even emailed pictures. No one responded. Then in November, Mom casually mentioned that Tessa's offered to host this year. It just makes more sense with the kids. I nodded, told her I understood. But deep down, something cracked. I had offered to host. I had already decorated the damn cabin. I had blocked off the entire week in my calendar. But once again, my gesture was treated like an afterthought. Still, I told myself it was fine. That I could spend Christmas on my own, maybe invite a few friends over, go snowshoeing, start a new tradition. I try not to take it personally. I even shipped gifts to Tessa's house for the kids, wrapped, labeled, no drama, just so they'd know I hadn't disappeared. And then Christmas morning came. I was drinking coffee in front of the fire, watching the snow drift down outside my window, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Tessa had tagged me in a photo on Instagram. The caption read, "Christmas morning with the whole fam. So blessed." I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. There they were. My parents, Tessa, Mark, Sean, the kids, even my Aunt Marlene, who I hadn't seen in years, sitting around a massive fireplace I knew far too well. Because it was mine. They were in my cabin. Every single one of them. I hadn't given them the code. I hadn't even told them I wouldn't be there. I never said it was available. But somehow, they had let themselves in, made themselves at home, and then posted about it like it was a normal family gathering. I zoomed in on the photo. My throw pillows. My rug. The mug in my dad's hand had a chip on the rim from where I dropped it last month. This wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. The rage came slowly, like a pot coming to a boil. First disbelief, then humiliation, then something deeper, betrayal. I scrolled through the rest of Tessa's post. Dozens of photos. The kids opening gifts under my tree, Mom and Tessa baking cookies in my kitchen, Sean making a cheers gesture with one of my limited edition whiskey glasses. Not one text. Not one call. Not a single mention that they were using my space. I almost threw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a breath, opened the comments, and typed, "Love this. Just FYI, the cabin you're in? I own it. Tenants move in January 3rd. Then I hit send. 3 minutes later, the post vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. And then my phone started buzzing. 61 calls in the span of an hour. 14 voicemails. All from my parents, Tessa, Sean, even Mark. Texts rolled in like hailstones. "Riley, can we talk? Why would you do that? Don't ruin this for the kids." It was just a misunderstanding. But was it? I stood in that quiet cabin, staring at the fire as my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. And that was the moment I decided I wasn't letting this go. Not this time. For the first few hours, I ignored the calls. I turned my phone face down, let the buzzing become background noise, and tried to calm the storm building in my chest. But when the voicemails started piling up, 14 by the end of the day, I knew I had to listen. Not because I wanted to make peace, but because I needed to know just how deep the betrayal ran. The first one was from my mom. Voice syrupy sweet, but laced with that edge I knew too well. "Riley, honey, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. We thought you weren't coming, and Tessa said it'd be fine to use the cabin. You never said you were using it, and it's not like we trashed anything. Please don't overreact. Call me." The second was my dad, his voice low and stiff. "Riley, this isn't the way to handle things. Family talks these things through. Don't make this about ownership. Call us back." Then came Tessa. "Oh my God, Riley, seriously? You're really going to put tenants in the cabin over Christmas? Without warning? You blindsided us. Everyone's upset, especially the kids." Ashton cried. Everly asked why Uncle Riley was being mean. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is so selfish." That one almost made me laugh. I was being selfish? For reclaiming my own space? After they snuck into it, hosted a party, and plastered it across social media like it was some family fairy tale I'd been too cold-hearted to join? Sean's voicemail was short. "Bro, I don't know what the hell that comment was about, but you need to chill. You weren't even coming. Nobody thought you cared. Don't burn bridges over this, man. It's Christmas." That voicemail was when the simmer turned into a boil. I'd been chill my entire life, letting things slide, swallowing the hurt, laughing off slights like they were just quirks of family. But this wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a scheduling mix-up. This was my entire family deciding I didn't matter. Not enough to invite. Not enough to ask. Not even enough to inform. And then they call me selfish. I didn't respond that day. Or the next. I packed up a few things and drove back to Seattle 2 days early. When I arrived, there was a large envelope waiting in my mailbox, certified mail, from a real estate agency. Confused, I opened it. It was a lease agreement. For the cabin. Signed. By Tessa. The tenant name had been filled out. Tessa Reynolds. Lease term, 1 year. Start date, December 15th. My hands started shaking. Attached was a note from the leasing agent. "Thank you for finalizing this. We received the signed lease and key copies from your sister last week. We're excited to move forward with the property management partnership. Please let us know when you'd like the direct deposit info for rental income." Rental income? Partnership? I stared at the documents for a long time, mind reeling. Tessa had posed as me. She had contacted the agency I'd mentioned casually months ago when I was exploring whether I should rent the cabin during ski season. She had given them the access code, had keys made, and even filled out paperwork in my name. The lease was technically void, since it didn't have my signature, but the boldness of it stunned me. She'd planned this. The whole family gathering at my cabin wasn't a spontaneous Christmas miracle. It was orchestrated, and they'd never planned to tell me. I drove straight to my lawyer's office the next morning. Rebecca's been my real estate attorney for years, calm, no nonsense, and fiercely competent. When I showed her the lease, she whistled softly. "This is borderline fraud," she said, flipping through the pages. "Definitely impersonation. She's lucky the agency didn't wire funds yet, or she'd be in even deeper." I didn't even know what to say. I just sat there, gripping the edge of the chair like the ground was shifting beneath me. Rebecca leaned forward. "Riley, I know this is family, but you need to decide how far you're willing to go. We can stop this, but it might get ugly." Ugly. That word echoed in my head all day. Because things were already ugly. They had been for years. This was just the first time I couldn't pretend otherwise. I didn't call my sister. I didn't confront her. I wanted to hear it from her lips. I wanted to see if she'd lie to my face. So when Mom called again, her fourth call that day, I picked up. "Hi," I said flatly. "Oh, honey," she breathed, like we were on the brink of reconciliation. "I'm so glad you answered. I've been worried sick." "Really?" I asked. "Because it seems like you've all been having a great time." There was a pause. "It wasn't personal, Riley. You're always so busy. And Tessa she had this whole thing planned." "Planned?" I said, voice tightening. "So you knew it was my cabin?" Another pause. "Well, yes. But she said you weren't using it. And she thought it would be nice for everyone." "She also signed a lease," I said. Silence. "She what?" my mom whispered. "She submitted a forged lease to a rental agency," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Using my name. My address. She gave them keys. Codes. Access to a property I own." "That can't be right," Mom said. "Tessa wouldn't." "She did." More silence. Then, "Well, maybe she thought you'd changed your mind. You never said you'd be using it." "I never said you could use it," I snapped. "Let alone lease it out. Do you realize how insane this is?" She huffed. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Riley. It's family. Sometimes we do things informally. Forging my signature isn't informal, Mom. It's illegal." She clicked her tongue. "Why are you being so harsh? It's Christmas." There it was again. That old guilt. But it didn't work this time. "Because you all made a choice," I said. "You chose to go behind my back. You chose to erase me. So don't talk to me about Christmas." I hung up. And that was the last time I spoke to her that week. 3 days later, Sean showed up in Seattle. I opened the door to find him standing there, sheepish grin on his face, hands shoved in the pockets of a too expensive leather jacket. "Bro," he said. "Let's talk." I didn't move. "How did you know where I live?" "Tessa," he said, without blinking. "She said you'd cool off by now." I stepped aside, not because I wanted to forgive him, but because I needed answers. We sat in my living room. I didn't offer him a drink. Sean looked around. "This place is nice. Didn't realize you were doing this well." That rankled. "I keep my business private." "Yeah," he said. Clearly. There was a long pause. "I didn't know about the lease," he said finally. "I swear. I thought you were letting her use the place." "And you didn't think it was weird that I wasn't there?" I asked. "That I hadn't posted, called, or shown up?" He shrugged. "I figured you were doing your solo thing again. You're hard to read, man." I didn't respond. Sean leaned forward. "Look, I get it. It was messed up. But you know how Tessa is. She thinks everything is hers by default. Always has. She crossed a line." "I know," he said quickly. "And she knows. But if you press charges or sue or something, Mom's gonna have a meltdown. Dad too. You're gonna nuke the family over this." "They already nuked it," I said. He rubbed his jaw. "So what now?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. "But I'm not sweeping this under the rug." He left soon after. Didn't argue. Didn't apologize again either. But later that night, I got a text from Tessa. "Sean told me you're being serious about this. Riley, you wouldn't actually ruin our family over a cabin. You've always had a flair for dramatics, but this is too far. Let it go." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a single sentence and hit send. "I've let a lot go, Tessa, but not this." And that's when everything started to unravel. The fallout wasn't loud. It didn't come crashing down like in movies. No dramatic confrontations in the rain. No tables flipped at family dinners. It was quieter than that. More suffocating. Like the slow spread of cold air under a door. The kind of silence that hums in the background and makes your skin itch. For the next few weeks, the family group chat went dark. Not that I expected applause for finally standing up for myself, but the sheer, synchronized silence was jarring. Nobody said a word. Not even the passive-aggressive "hope everyone's doing well" messages that usually followed arguments. It was like I'd been carved out, neatly, like fat from meat. Still technically there, but not wanted. January rolled in fast, and the Denver cabin echoed with the sound of movers. I flew back for 2 days to oversee the transition. Boxes, signatures, walkthroughs, keys handed off to new tenants. I changed the door codes, updated the listing with the management agency under my name only, and removed all backup keys. I'd locked down everything, literally and figuratively. And yet, the place felt hollow. Not because I missed them, but because I realized, maybe for the first time in my adult life, that the version of family I'd been chasing didn't exist. Not really. It had always been an illusion. Fragile, scripted, photoshopped into existence by people who smiled wide for the holiday card and then cut you out of the picture the moment it became inconvenient. I sat alone in the cabin that night, last night before tenants moved in, on the floor, wrapped in a throw blanket, drinking tea that tasted like paper. The furniture had been cleaned, the decorations boxed. It didn't feel like mine anymore, and oddly, that made it easier to let go. I realized I didn't want this place to be some shrine to forgiveness. I didn't want it to sit empty waiting for a family that would never knock. So I stopped waiting. The next few months were quiet, but not empty. I threw myself into work, not out of escapism, but purpose. I'd been toying with an idea for months, something tech-adjacent, but more personal. A mentorship platform for young entrepreneurs who didn't come from flashy backgrounds or elite universities. People like me, quiet builders, overlooked minds, the ones expected to understand, while others got the spotlight. I started sketching it out, slowly, methodically. Late nights, early mornings, whiteboards and wireframes. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need applause this time. There's something strange about working in silence after years of trying to be heard. At first, it's disorienting. You wonder if you're disappearing. But then, it becomes power. You start doing things for you. Not for validation. Not to prove a point. Just because it matters to you. I built a skeleton team. 2 designers, 1 back-end engineer, 1 community lead. All of them freelancers I'd worked with before. We called it Foundry, because it was about building, shaping, forging something real. At night, I walked. Just walked. Around my neighborhood in Seattle. No headphones. No distractions. I needed to learn how to be alone without feeling punished. I started noticing things I hadn't seen in years. The uneven sidewalk near the corner bakery, the old man with the blue cap who always nodded at me, the cat that seemed to own the entire block. The world had been there all along. I'd just been looking somewhere else. I also started therapy. Not because of the cabin. Not because of Tessa. But because I realized I'd been carrying too much for too long and calling it strength. The therapist, Marla, was a gentle, thoughtful woman who asked very little in the first few sessions. Just enough to let me empty out the clutter. Memories of being skipped over. Dismissed. Used. "You said something interesting last week," she said one Thursday. "You said, 'I'm the one who never needed anything.' Do you think that was true?" I shrugged. "I think it's what they wanted to believe." She nodded slowly. "And what did you want?" It was such a simple question. But I didn't have an answer. I started journaling after that. Not every day, just when it felt like too much. I wrote down things I never said aloud. Like how I'd always hated being the easy child. How it wasn't easy to be quiet. How it hurt to buy gifts no one remembered, to send messages no one replied to show up and be invisible. I wrote about the cabin. I wrote about Christmas. I wrote about the night I saw the Instagram post, and how the silence afterward had felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. And slowly, so slowly, I started feeling something strange. Not peace exactly, but clarity. I realized I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. The family I'd built in my head, the one that cared, that called, that showed up without being asked. That family didn't exist. Maybe it never had. And grieving it like a death felt oddly healing. One night in February, I got a message from Mark, Tessa's husband. "Hey man, I know things are tense. Just wanted you to know I had no idea about the lease stuff." That was all, Tessa. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at the message for a long time. There was no apology, just a quiet absolving of responsibility. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I got a call from a Denver number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi Riley, this is Kathy from Snowview Elementary. I'm calling because Everly listed you as an emergency contact on her school file. There's no issue, Just a clerical update. But we wanted to confirm if that information is still accurate. I blinked at the phone. I wasn't even told I was listed. They put me down as a backup. Without asking. Still useful, huh? I didn't call back. I forwarded the voicemail to Tessa with a single line. Remove me from the school contact list. Immediately. No response. Of course. Foundry launched in April. Soft launch. Invite only. We rolled out to a small group of college grads and solopreneurs, many from underserved communities, first-gen students, people building quiet businesses out of dorm rooms and kitchens. We didn't go viral. We didn't need to. But people wrote to us. Long messages. Gratitude. Relief. Finally, something built for people like me. I saved every email. Printed a few. Framed one. I didn't tell anyone in my family. They wouldn't have asked anyway. One night in May, Sean messaged me again. No greeting. Just a screenshot of a family Facebook post. My parents had posted photos from Mother's Day brunch. Tessa, her kids, my parents. Balloons, cake, captions about blessings. I wasn't in it. I wasn't mentioned. Again, under the image, Sean had written, "You really done with them?" I stared at it for a while. Then I typed back, "I think they've been done with me for a long time. I'm just catching up." He didn't reply. That summer, I went back to the cabin, not to stay, just to check in, do some seasonal maintenance, make sure everything was running smoothly. The tenants were out for the weekend. It was quiet, still. I walked the old trails I used to hike as a kid, saw my breath in the morning mist, listened to the way the trees didn't ask for anything. On the way out, I stopped at a small gift shop by the lake. A carved wood sign caught my eye. It read, "Family isn't who you come from. It's who stands with you when you stop trying to earn it." I bought it, hung it in my apartment entryway. The next time my phone rang with a family name, I let it ring out. I didn't even flinch, because I wasn't falling anymore. I was climbing, and I was starting to like the view. The funny thing about clarity is that once it clicks into place, you start seeing patterns that were there all along. Little things I used to excuse. Mom's backhanded comments, Tessa's snide jokes wrapped in just teasing, Sean's disappearances whenever things got inconvenient, began to look less like isolated slips and more like a blueprint. A carefully balanced system where I played a role, the background character, the reliable one, the one who wouldn't make a fuss. And as long as I stayed in that role, everything ran smoothly for them. But now, I was out of frame, and they didn't know what to do. By early June, I was in a different place entirely, emotionally, mentally, even physically. I'd moved to a new condo near Pike Place Market. Exposed brick, wide windows, a view of the water if you tilted your head just right. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. No shared keys. No forced smiles and group photos. Just peace. I'd also taken the time to revisit some legal matters. The cabin, for example. After the forged lease incident, I'd updated the ownership records to route everything through a holding company I quietly set up called Lurwood Ventures. My name was nowhere public on the title anymore. The property taxes, the utilities, the contracts, they all pointed to Lurwood. If anyone went snooping, they'd hit a wall. Just a shell LLC in a chain of other shells. Why? Because I wanted to see if Tessa would try anything again. And I had a feeling she would. My instincts were proven right when I got an email from the property manager in late July. "Hi Riley. Just wanted to confirm something strange." A woman named Tess Reynolds emailed asking to regain management access to the cabin. She claimed to be the owner and sent a fake utility bill as proof. Thought you should know. I stared at the email. So she was still trying. Still clinging to the illusion that if she could just convince someone, anyone, that she had a right to my things, I'd eventually fold. But I wasn't folding anymore. I replied, "Thank you for flagging this. Please forward me the email and attach a copy to the incident log. I'll handle the rest." Then I reached out to Rebecca, my attorney, and we drafted a cease and desist letter. Not just for Tessa, but for all of them. See, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the entitlement ran. It wasn't just the cabin. It was the dozens of little things that had stacked up over the years. The phone plans I'd been paying for since college, the credit card I'd once co-signed for Sean that was still being used, the shared Netflix account where I was still the one footing the bill, despite not being welcome at Christmas. I wanted it all cut. So I sat down, spreadsheet in front of me, and started tallying. Not just money, but patterns. Connections. How often I was the fallback plan. The silent donor. The emotional janitor cleaning up after everyone's mess. By the end of that week, I had a list and a plan. It started with quiet disentanglement. First, I froze the shared credit card. Sent Sean a courtesy email. This card is being deactivated. Any balances are your responsibility going forward. Please don't contact me about payment. I won't be covering it. Second, I pulled the plug on the shared family streaming accounts. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, even the Ring account I'd once set up for mom and dad's house when they couldn't figure out how to install their own. Third, I removed myself from any and all emergency contact lists. Schools, doctors, even the vet for Tessa's dog. Yes, somehow, I'd ended up listed there too. Fourth, I filed paperwork to formalize Lurewood Ventures as the official owner of all 3 of my properties. The cabin, my condo, and a small duplex I'd quietly bought as a side investment. All trust managed, all ironclad. But it wasn't just about cutting them off. I wanted them to understand. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I invited them to lunch. All of them. At a quiet restaurant downtown. One of those wood-paneled places with linen napkins and waiters who don't write anything down. I booked a private room, just in case voices were raised. Or truths were finally heard. Tessa arrived first, of course, right on time, and already flustered. She was wearing her polished mom uniform, soft beige cardigan, gold pendant necklace, oversized sunglasses on her head like a crown. She looked around like she owned the place and barely acknowledged me when I stood to greet her. Then came Sean, 10 minutes late, smelling faintly like cologne and carelessness. And finally, my parents, my mother in pearls and pastel lipstick, my dad quiet, unreadable as always. We sat. No one ordered. They waited for me to speak. I didn't rush. I let the silence stretch just long enough to feel heavy. Then I folded my hands and said, I wanted to say something once. Just once. And I wanted you all to hear it at the same time. Tessa rolled her eyes. Riley, if this is about the cabin again. It's not just about the cabin, I said evenly. It's about everything. They stared. I continued. For years, I let things slide. I paid. I showed up. I didn't complain. I thought that's what family meant. But now I realize it was just permission. Permission for all of you to keep taking and pretending it was normal. My mom frowned. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is being excluded from Christmas in my own home. What's not fair is being told I'm selfish for reacting to fraud. What's not fair is being treated like a backup generator that no one wants until the lights go out. Sean shifted uncomfortably. Tessa crossed her arms. I pulled out a small folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a printed breakdown of everything I'd deactivated, transferred, removed, or closed. It wasn't dramatic. Just facts. These are the accounts I've shut down. The cards I've closed. The utilities I've transferred. Going forward, I'm not your fallback. I'm not your sponsor. And I'm not your scapegoat. Tessa scoffed. Is this revenge? Some power trip? No, I said. This is freedom. Yours and mine. My dad finally spoke. Son, this seems a little drastic. I met his eyes. No, Dad. What was drastic was forging my name. What was drastic was cutting me out of holidays and then acting shocked when I didn't want to fund the next one. They didn't apologize. I didn't expect them to. I paid the bill without a word and left. I never expected that conversation to change them. But I needed it. Not for closure, but clarity. And that clarity? It gave me momentum. Foundry hit its stride that summer. We brought in new mentors, self-made business owners, investors who'd built wealth without Ivy League degrees or flashy VC deals. We partnered with local colleges and startup incubators. We launched a podcast. I even gave a few interviews, anonymously at first, then eventually by name. One of them ended up in a business newsletter Tessa subscribes to. She didn't reach out. But 2 weeks later, I got a LinkedIn connection request from Mark. No message. Just a silent bridge-building gesture. I didn't accept. Not yet. Because I wasn't done building something of my own. Something they couldn't take credit for. Something they couldn't hijack or twist into a photo op. Something that wasn't a cabin or a family brunch or a birthday dinner where no one remembered my name. This was mine. And the best part? They had no idea what was coming next. Revenge, I've come to realize, doesn't always need to look like fire. It doesn't have to be loud or cruel or wrapped in petty theatrics. The most satisfying revenge is quiet. Surgical. The kind that doesn't demand applause but leaves no room for denial. And in the end, mine wasn't just about payback. It was about putting a period at the end of a sentence they never let me finish. By September, Foundry had gone from a small mentorship circle to something bigger. We'd attracted the attention of a few angel investors, not because I was chasing money, I had enough, but because they believed in what we were doing. We weren't just helping new entrepreneurs. We were teaching them how to navigate a system that had ignored people like us for too long. We were showing them how to build something with no family name, no rich uncle, no safety net. In the middle of all that growth, something poetic happened. I got a call from a nonprofit organization I'd worked with before, small business grants for single parents, mostly women, often overlooked. They were losing funding, and a mutual contact said they were looking for someone to quietly step in and help restructure the board and offer operational support. No fanfare, just someone who knew how to rebuild. I asked for the board list. Tessa's name was on it. Apparently, she'd been on the board for 2 years. A community face, they called her. She helped with social media, fundraising events, donor dinners, mostly surface-level things. But she was good at playing the polished advocate. The look at this empowered mompreneur aesthetic. I asked for a meeting. Quietly, the executive director, Dana, met me for coffee. I explained who I was. I told her about Foundry. I didn't bring up Tessa at all. Dana, it turned out, had heard of our platform. She smiled wide. We've been trying to build something similar in-house, she said. But we don't have the tech or the staff. I offered to help. I asked for no salary, no title, just a consulting agreement that would give me access to the organization's operational structure. A foot in the door. She said yes. And just like that, I stepped into my sister's world. But not as a brother, as the guy she hadn't seen coming. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked quietly. I reviewed budgets. I optimized workflows. I hosted a virtual workshop on funding strategies that drew more attendance than any of their prior donor dinners. Dana was thrilled. So was the board. They offered me a formal seat. I accepted. Tessa didn't even know I was involved. We were ships passing in adjacent inboxes. She still thought I was just that tech guy in Seattle. Then came the Grant Gala. Annual event. Big venue. Open bar. Silent auction. All the right hashtags. I was invited as a board member. So was she. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I asked Dana for a favor. I offered to sponsor the event, anonymously. Full venue rental, catering, AV. No name on the banners. No speeches. Just one small request. I wanted to handle the donor appreciation video. She agreed. I called in a favor from a videographer friend. We gathered footage from mints at Foundry. Testimonials. Stories. People who'd built side hustles into storefronts. Who'd paid rent from their first freelance gigs. Who no longer had to choose between daycare and chasing a dream. I narrated it myself. Calm. Simple. No bragging. Just truths. At the end of the video, a black screen faded in. Just white text. This event was made possible by a silent investor. Someone who believes in second chances. Even when others only remember the first mistake. The room was dead quiet when it ended. I know because Dana told me. Tessa was at the front table. She clapped politely. Then Dana got up and made her speech. She thanked the board. She thanked the mentors. And then, casually, she said, "We're especially grateful to our new operations advisor, Riley, whose platform, Foundry, is now an official partner, and whose generosity made tonight possible." Tessa's face, Dana later told me, turned to stone. I hadn't just shown up. I'd built something under her nose and lifted the very community she claimed to champion. Without her help, without her approval, without ever asking for a seat at her curated table. She didn't come over that night. She didn't text. But 2 days later, she resigned from the board. No explanation. No farewell post. Just gone. And that's when the ripple started. See, once people realized she wasn't involved in Foundry, had never been, they started asking questions. Especially some of the nonprofit's top donors. One of them reached out to me directly. "We always assumed you two were partners," she said. She always implied. She implies a lot of things, I replied with a smile. The next time I heard from Tessa, it wasn't a message. It was a podcast. One of those lifestyle shows where she was a guest, episode about overcoming toxic family dynamics. She told a neat little story about being betrayed by a sibling who used their success to sabotage her community work. She never said my name. She didn't have to. But I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. While she recorded her curated narrative, I was closing a partnership deal with a university incubator that would give Foundry access to 1,200 students annually. Real people. Real change. Sean reached out again in November. This time it was different. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say, I think I get it now. What it feels like to be left out. Things have been weird. Mom and Dad barely talk to me unless they need something. Tessa's freezing me out. It sucks. I stared at his message for a long time. Then I replied, I'm not happy that you're hurting, but I am glad you're starting to see it. He didn't reply for a while. Then, can we talk sometime? Just us. I said yes, because not all bridges need to be burned. Some just need new architects. As for my parents, the silence stretched into winter. No calls, no cards, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook tag. And yet, I felt lighter than I ever had. I celebrated the holidays with a few close friends, the ones who'd become my chosen family. We cooked. We laughed. I hosted them in my condo, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to check my phone for obligatory family messages, because none were coming, and I was finally okay with that. Then, on Christmas morning, my phone buzzed. Not with a call, but with a photo. A text from Sean. He and his girlfriend. Someone new, someone warm, smiling in front of a tiny tree, holding mugs with "starting over" written in gold cursive. Below it, he'd written, no family drama this year. Just peace. Hope you found yours too. I smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Because revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reclamation. Reclaiming space. Reclaiming peace. Reclaiming the version of yourself they tried to convince you didn't matter. I looked around my home, my life, myself, and I knew I hadn't just walked away. I'd risen.